Last Halloween, everyone laughed at me. They thought it was funny. Until they saw my face. I made my costume myself. Every stitch, every tear, every dream of finally being noticed. For 3 months, I sat in my tiny apartment, fingers bleeding from needle pricks, creating what I thought would be my masterpiece, a Victorian ghost bride, elegant, haunting, beautiful. I found vintage lace at thrift stores, spent my grocery money on pearl beads, and stayed up until dawn hand sewing intricate patterns that would catch the light just right. I practiced my entrance in the mirror. I rehearsed conversations I might have. For the first time in years, I felt hopeful. Maybe this would be the night I finally belonged somewhere. They threw drinks on me, tore my dress, and called me the ghost nobody invited. The red punch soaked through my white lace, turning my hours of work into a bloody mess. They grabbed at my veil, ripping it from my head, laughing as my carefully curled hair fell flat and wet against my face. Someone pushed me, and I fell backward into the punch bowl, glass cutting through my dress, cutting through my skin. "Look at the pathetic ghost," they screamed. "Even dead people have better fashion sense." That's when I broke inside. I walked home soaked in fake blood. But the curse I whispered was real. The rain mixed with the punch, with my tears, with something else, something darker that was seeping out of my very soul. My shoes squelched with every step, leaving bloody footprints on the sidewalk that the rain couldn't wash away fast enough. And as I walked, as the cold October wind cut through my ruined dress, I felt something walking behind me, something that had been waiting for this moment, this level of pain, this depth of humiliation. I didn't pray for forgiveness. I prayed to be remembered. I stood in my bathroom, looking at myself in the cracked mirror, mascara running like black tears, my dress torn and stained, blood from the broken glass mixing with the fake blood from their cruel joke. And I spoke words that came from somewhere deep, somewhere ancient, somewhere angry. "Let them laugh," I whispered to my reflection. "Let them laugh until their throats are raw. Let them laugh until they can't breathe. Let them laugh until they see what real horror looks like." The mirror cracked a little more with each word, spider webbing out from where my reflection's eyes stared back at me. And something in those cracks stared back. They're all back this year. Same house, same laughter. 364 days I waited. 364 days I planned. I watched them through their windows, followed them to their jobs, learned their fears, their secrets, their shame. I know which one cries herself to sleep because her husband doesn't love her anymore. I know which one steals money from his mother's purse. I know which one hits her children when she thinks no one is watching. But this time, I'm the one wearing their faces. You see, revenge isn't about becoming a monster. It's about showing people the monsters they already are. It's about holding up a mirror to their cruelty and making them look, really look, at what they've become. Tonight, they'll see themselves clearly for the first time. Tonight, they'll understand what they did to me. Tonight, they'll feel every ounce of humiliation, every moment of pain, every second of despair that they forced me to swallow. You wanted scary, right? Everyone laughed at my costume until they saw my face. The lights went out at exactly 11:47 p.m., just like last year, just like the moment they destroyed my dreams. But this time, when the darkness came, I was ready. In the blackness, I moved among them like smoke, like shadow, like the ghost they said I was. One by one, I touched their faces, and one by one, they saw themselves as I saw them that night. Cruel, petty, empty creatures feeding on the pain of others. Sarah, who started the laughter, found herself trapped in a mirror where every reflection showed her getting older, uglier, more alone, until she was screaming at the truth of her future. Mike, who pushed me into the punch bowl, discovered his hands wouldn't stop pushing his friends, his family, everyone he ever loved, until he was completely alone in a world where everything he touched turned to ash. Jessica, who called me pathetic, found her voice stuck repeating every cruel word she'd ever spoken, over and over, until the weight of her own venom choked her. And the others? Oh, the others each got exactly what they deserved. When the lights came back on, they were all standing exactly where they'd been, but something fundamental had changed. They looked at each other with new eyes, eyes that had seen the darkness inside themselves, eyes that would never again find cruelty funny. I stood among them, visible now, my torn Victorian dress restored to its original beauty, my face finally truly seen, and for the first time in my life, or death, I smiled. If they ever laughed at you, remember, ghosts don't haunt the innocent. They haunt the guilty. Some people think Halloween is about fear, about scaring people for fun. But real Halloween, true Halloween, is about justice. It's about the night when the powerless get their power back, when the forgotten get remembered, when the ones who were laughed at finally get the last laugh. To everyone who's ever been pushed down, laughed at, made to feel invisible, you are seen. You matter. And sometimes, just sometimes, the universe finds a way to balance the scales. Comment, "Justice for Clara," if you'd stand up for the ones they laughed at, and share this story before midnight. Because some stories need to be told, some voices need to be heard, and some ghosts are exactly what this world needs. You want to know the real story? The story behind the story? Let me tell you about the 3 months before that Halloween party, before they destroyed everything I had worked for. I wasn't always alone. I had a life once, friends once, dreams that seemed possible. But life has a way of stripping those things away, piece by piece, until you're standing in the ruins of everything you thought you were. My mother died that spring. Cancer. I watched her waste away in a hospital bed while the bills piled up around me like gravestone markers. The funeral home wanted money I didn't have. The cemetery wanted money I couldn't earn fast enough. I sold everything, her jewelry, her furniture, her clothes, everything except the sewing machine she taught me to use when I was 7 years old. "Clara," she used to say, her hands guiding mine over the fabric, "when you create something beautiful, you leave a piece of your soul in it. Make sure it's a piece worth leaving behind." After she died, I couldn't afford my apartment anymore. I moved into a studio above Mrs. Chen's alterations shop, paying rent by helping her with wedding dresses and prom gowns. Every day, I watched happy people come in for fittings, saw their excitement about special occasions, about moments that mattered. That's when I heard about the Harrison Halloween party. The Harrisons, old money, big house, the kind of people who could solve my problems with the spare change in their couch cushions. They threw this party every year, and everyone who was anyone in town would be there. I thought, I thought if I could make something spectacular, something that would make them notice me, maybe I could get work, real work, wedding dress commissions, costume design, anything that would let me use the one skill I had left. So I started planning. I researched historical accuracy, studied museum pieces online, read about Victorian mourning customs and burial rituals. I wanted to create something that was both beautiful and haunting, elegant and otherworldly. The base dress came from an estate sale, a 1950s wedding gown that had yellowed with age, perfect for what I had in mind. I carefully tea-stained it further, aged the lace with coffee and thyme. I hand-sewed hundreds of tiny seed pearls in patterns that would catch candlelight like stars. The veil was my masterpiece, 3 layers of antique lace, each one representing a different aspect of death, grief, acceptance, and finally, peace. I embroidered it with silver thread, creating patterns of willow branches and morning flowers that took me weeks to complete. I made the jewelry myself, too, a choker of black velvet with a cameo pendant that I painted to look like a portrait of a woman who had been forgotten by time, earrings that caught the light like tears, a ring that looked like it had been worn by someone who had loved deeply and lost everything. Every night for 3 months, I worked until my fingers bled. I skipped meals to buy materials. I stayed up until dawn perfecting every detail. Because this wasn't just a costume to me. This was my resurrection. This was my chance to rise from the ashes of everything I had lost. The night of the party, I spent 4 hours getting ready. I curled my hair with hot rollers I borrowed from Mrs. Chen. I applied my makeup with the precision of a portrait artist, creating the illusion of someone caught between life and death, beautiful and tragic. When I looked in the mirror, I almost didn't recognize myself. I looked like someone from another time, someone with a story worth telling. I looked like art. I walked to the Harrison mansion with my heart pounding, my costume flowing behind me like a piece of the night itself. I could see the party through the windows, elegant people in expensive costumes, laughter spilling out into the October air, warmth and light and life. I stood outside for 10 minutes, gathering courage. I practiced my introduction one more time. I smoothed my skirt, adjusted my veil, and rang the doorbell. Mrs. Harrison answered, dressed as Cleopatra in what was probably real gold. She looked at me for a long moment, her eyes taking in every detail of my costume. For a second, I thought I saw admiration there. "How interesting," she said finally. "Well, come in, I suppose." The first few minutes weren't so bad. People stared, but I thought it was because my costume was effective. A few people asked about it, and I eagerly explained the historical details, the symbolism, the months of work I'd put into it. But then I heard the whispers. "Look at that girl trying so hard. Someone's taking Halloween way too seriously. Is she supposed to be scary or just pathetic?" The whispers got louder. The laughter started small, just a few giggles here and there, but it grew like a fire catching wind until it seemed like everyone in the room was laughing at me. That's when Sarah Morrison, the mayor's daughter, stood up on a chair and announced to the entire party, "Ladies and gentlemen, I present the ghost of fashion disasters past." The room erupted. People pulled out their phones to take pictures. Someone started a slow clap. Others began chanting, "Boo, boo," like I was a bad performer on the stage. I tried to leave, but they formed a circle around me. "Oh, don't go," they called. "The party's just getting started. Show us your other tricks." That's when Mike Peterson grabbed my veil and yanked it off my head. "Let's see what's under here," he shouted, and my carefully curled hair tumbled down, ruined by his rough hands. Jessica Williams threw her drink first, a red wine that splashed across my white lace like blood. "Oops," she giggled. "Now you look even more dead." Others followed her lead. Punch, wine, beer, everything they could grab, they threw at me. My beautiful dress, my months of work, my dreams of resurrection, all of it ruined in seconds. But the worst part wasn't the drinks or the laughter or even the physical pain when I fell. The worst part was seeing the joy on their faces. They were having the time of their lives destroying me. My humiliation was their entertainment. When I finally managed to push through them and run for the door, I heard Sarah call after me. Thanks for the show, Ghost Girl. Same time next year? I ran home through the rain, sobbing so hard I could barely see. My beautiful costume was ruined. My dignity was shattered, and my last hope for a new life was dead. But as I ran, something else was being born. Something dark and patient and very, very angry. That night, I tried to wash the stains out of my dress, but they wouldn't come clean. The red punch had set into the fabric like blood, like a mark that couldn't be erased. So I stopped trying. Instead, I hung the dress in my closet and left it there, stained and torn and ruined, as a reminder of what they had done to me. Days passed, weeks. I tried to go back to my normal life, but normal didn't exist anymore. I couldn't sew without remembering their laughter. I couldn't look in the mirror without seeing their faces, twisted with cruel joy. Mrs. Chen noticed the change in me. Clara, she said one day, her voice gentle with concern, you're becoming someone else, someone harder. She was right. I was changing day by day, hour by hour. The soft, hopeful person who had spent 3 months creating beauty was dying, and something else was taking her place. I started having dreams. In them, I was back at the party, but this time, I was the one in control. This time, when they laughed, their laughter turned into screams. This time, when they threw drinks, the liquid turned to acid in their hands. This time, I was the one who decided when the fun was over. The dreams became more vivid, more detailed, more real. I could feel their fear like a physical thing, could taste their terror on the air. And in the dreams, I liked it. I started researching, not costume history this time, but something darker, old books, forgotten websites, whispered stories about people who had been wronged and what they had done about it. That's when I found the story of Eleanor Blackthorne. Eleanor was a seamstress in Victorian England, much like me. She had been commissioned to create a wedding dress for the daughter of a wealthy family, and she had poured her heart and soul into the work. But when the dress was finished, the family refused to pay her, claiming the work was inadequate. Eleanor cursed them, not with words, but with thread and needle, sewing her anger and pain into a new dress, a funeral shroud for the bride who had betrayed her. The bride wore Eleanor's original dress to her wedding, but when she looked in the mirror during the ceremony, she saw herself in the funeral shroud instead. She screamed, tore at the white silk, but couldn't remove what wasn't really there. She died that night, still wearing the dress that Eleanor had made, still seeing the vision of her own death in every reflective surface. That's when I understood what I needed to do. I took my ruined costume out of the closet and spread it across my workspace. For the next year, I worked on it again, but this time, I wasn't creating beauty. I was creating justice. I sewed new patterns into the fabric, patterns of pain, of humiliation, of revenge. I embroidered their names into the lace with thread so fine it was almost invisible. I painted their faces into the cameo pendant, layer after layer, until they were trapped inside the jewelry like insects in amber. And with every stitch, every bead, every brushstroke, I whispered their names. I whispered their sins. I whispered what they would pay. The dress changed as I worked on it. The stains didn't disappear, but they transformed, becoming part of the design instead of flaws to be hidden. The tears in the fabric became deliberate slashes that revealed glimpses of something darker underneath. By the time October came again, the dress was ready. And so was I. I was no longer Clara the seamstress, Clara the victim, Clara the forgotten. I was something new, something that existed in the space between life and death, between justice and revenge. I put on the dress on Halloween morning, and it fit differently than it had before. It fit like a second skin, like armor, like a promise that was finally ready to be kept. Looking in the mirror, I saw myself clearly for the first time in a year. I was beautiful again, but it was a terrible beauty, the kind that made people look away even as they were drawn to it. That evening, I walked back to the Harrison mansion, but this time I didn't knock. This time, I simply appeared. They were all there just as I knew they would be. The same people, the same costumes, the same cruel laughter filling the same rooms. Some of them had forgotten about me entirely. Others remembered and pointed me out to their friends as a joke from last year. "Oh my God," I heard Sarah say to her boyfriend. "It's the pathetic ghost girl from last Halloween. I can't believe she came back." I smiled at that, because she was right in a way. The pathetic ghost girl had come back, but she had brought friends. You see, revenge isn't something you do alone. It's something you gather, like thread, like fabric, like all the small pieces that eventually become something larger and more powerful than the sum of their parts. For a year, I had been collecting every insult I had ever received, every time I had been ignored or dismissed or laughed at, every moment of pain from my mother's death, every hour of loneliness in my tiny apartment, every dream that had been crushed before it could take flight. And I wasn't the only one. In that room full of beautiful, successful, popular people, I could see the others, the ghosts of everyone they had ever hurt. The quiet girl from high school who had killed herself after they spread rumors about her. The old man they had swindled out of his retirement savings. The children they had neglected. The hearts they had broken. The lives they had destroyed for their own amusement. We were all there that night, all of us, together, finally ready to be seen. I moved through the party like a shadow made solid. People saw me, but didn't quite register what they were seeing. I was familiar enough to ignore, strange enough to avoid, until the lights went out. In the darkness, we began our work. Sarah found herself alone in a room full of mirrors, but every reflection showed her a different version of herself. Older, uglier, more desperate. She watched herself age and decay and die while her reflection laughed at her with her own voice. "Stop it!" she screamed, but her reflection just laughed harder. "This isn't real." But it was real, more real than anything she had ever experienced, because for the first time in her life, she was seeing herself as others saw her, petty, cruel, empty, desperately trying to fill the void inside herself by tearing down others. Mike found his hands wouldn't obey him anymore. Every time he tried to touch someone, he pushed them away instead. His girlfriend, his parents, his friends, everyone he tried to reach out to was shoved away by hands that had learned to destroy instead of embrace. He tried to grab his girlfriend's hand to steady himself, but instead he knocked her down. He tried to help her up, but pushed her further away. Every gesture of connection became an act of violence. "I'm sorry," he cried, but his apology came out as laughter. "I don't know what's happening." Jessica discovered that every word she spoke became visible in the air around her, hovering like smoke. But they weren't the words she was trying to say. They were every cruel thing she had ever said to anyone, ever. "You're pathetic. Nobody likes you. Why don't you just disappear? You'll never amount to anything." The words surrounded her like a cloud of poison, getting thicker and thicker until she couldn't breathe without tasting her own venom. Tom, who had taken pictures of me to post online, found himself trapped inside a photograph that never stopped developing. He watched himself become smaller and smaller, more and more faded, until he was just a smudge in the background of his own life. "Let me out!" he screamed, but his voice was getting quieter as he became less and less real. Soon he would be exactly what he had tried to make me: invisible, forgotten, a joke that nobody remembered. Lisa, who had organized the whole humiliation, found herself at a party where she was the only guest. She ran from room to room, calling for her friends, but there was nobody there, just empty rooms, cold food, and the echo of her own voice begging for attention that would never come. She had spent her whole life surrounding herself with people who didn't really care about her, and now she was finally alone with the truth of what she was: nothing. And the others, all the others who had laughed and pointed and made jokes at my expense, each found themselves face to face with the consequences of their cruelty. The universe had finally caught up with them, and there was nowhere left to run. When the lights came back on, they were all exactly where they had been when the darkness fell. But they were changed, broken, finally, finally understanding what it felt like to be powerless, to be humiliated, to be destroyed for someone else's entertainment. I stood in the center of the room, no longer invisible, no longer ignored. My dress was perfect now, every stain transformed into beauty, every tear revealing something more magnificent underneath. "Thank you," I said to the room full of people who had tried to destroy me, "for teaching me that some things are worth dying for, and some things are worth coming back for." Then I left, not through the door. I simply faded away, like smoke, like shadow, like the ghost they had always said I was. But I left them with a gift: the gift of understanding, the gift of consequence, the gift of finally knowing what it felt like to be on the other side of their cruelty. And somewhere in the darkness, all the others they had hurt smiled with me, because justice, real justice, isn't about punishment. It's about balance. It's about making sure that the pain stops with them. It's about protecting the next person who might walk into a room full of beautiful people, wearing something they made with love, hoping to be accepted, hoping to belong. The next day, there were changes. Sarah started a foundation for bullying prevention. Mike began volunteering at a shelter for domestic violence survivors. Jessica became a counselor for teenagers struggling with depression. Not because they wanted to, at first, but because they finally understood the weight of words, the power of cruelty, the responsibility that comes with the ability to hurt others. And me? I'm still here, still watching, still ready, because there are always more parties, more laughter, more people who think that hurting others is entertaining. But now they know I'm watching. Now they know that every ghost has a story. And some stories demand to be heard. So the next time you see someone standing alone at a party, someone who put their heart into something only to have it mocked, someone who just wanted to belong, remember my story. Remember that ghosts don't haunt places. They haunt people. And some people deserve to be haunted forever.